Hello and welcome to a look at Bloodwych for the Amiga, a game that was made by Mirrorsoft and released by Imageworks. Before we get too far into the video, I do want to apologize about the gameplay in the background being a bit dull, not very exciting, but I severely underestimated this game and got mauled, and I didn't have a save game that was remotely recent, and getting back to that point was proving a bit cumbersome. So I hope you will forgive me for that. The daily dose of plot. The plot of Bloodwych is that eons ago there was a secret order of psychic mages called the Bloodwych. They guarded, governed, controlled, if you want, the land of Tricia, and specifically the major city Trehatwell. And while people respected them in a sense of partial awe, partial fear, the land was safe. Of course, we can't have a game without a bad guy, and the second in command, Zendik, called Spiritual Willy amongst friends, decided that he wanted to be in charge, and he started dabbling into dark magic, eventually becoming so powerful that he could dismantle the Grand Dragon and dismiss the Bloodwych to the astral plane. You can possibly imagine what happened to Trehatwell after that little incident. A reign of terror started. Life wasn't good. The morning coffee was cold. All that good stuff that happens when a bad guy takes over a location. Out of nowhere, a thought apparently materializes. And two members of the Bloodwych, which of course are trapped in the astral plane, are tasked to locate the remaining 16 champions of Tricia and get them to join up. At least 4 of them, but up to 8 potentially. And put a stop to our good friend Zendik by locating some towers of storage, get the crystals from them, take them to his tower, and kick Zen well and truly in the, yeah, you get the rest. It's a very, very subtle way of describing that it's one of the original Bloodwych members actually being in control of the character you select. And yeah, interesting little, I don't know, quirk, I think it's called. Bloodwych is a dungeon crawler, and when it comes to dungeon crawlers, there's none more famous, at least for that time, than Eye of the Beholder. And for good reason, you could say. Eye of the Beholder was a very, very well polished and high quality game, but of course it was a Dungeons and Dragons licensed product back in the day when we actually called it Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Ooh, years ago. But even though it had a different setting compared to what people were used to when it came to Dungeons and Dragons games, you know, if you knew Dungeons and Dragons, you knew the rules. You knew what you could expect. You knew what a paladin would do, what a priest would do, or a cleric would do, what the different spells did, what the different monsters were, and all that kind of stuff. Of course, that is the price of being a licensed product, is that you probably should adhere to the license you cover. Bloodwych came sometime before Eye of the Beholder, and it is not the first dungeon crawler. I'm fairly sure that is that title belongs to Dungeon Master, which is a game I haven't covered yet, and I might do later on. But in Bloodwych, as I was mentioning concerning the plot, you are in control of one individual and can build a party of up to 4. Which I would recommend. You could possibly play it with less than 4, but The experience I had recently wasn't particularly pleasant with 4, so with 3 would be even worse, and solo, yeah. Likely someone's doing it solo, and that's cool, but I wouldn't. But you don't just create the other characters, so you don't just hire them from some list or anything. No. You have to go through Trihatro itself, locating the different champions that you want to join, to have joining your party. Now, the city is a bit of a labyrinth, and the NPCs, they are solid objects, so you can't move through them. So if you are bumping into an NPC you have no interest in, then you will have to wait for the NPC to find something better to do than blocking your path, which means that gathering a party can be rather a lengthy affair. That is why the video started after I had gathered the party I wanted. The different classes are signified by the symbols of a deck of cards. Clubs being the warriors, dragon spades being the warriors, clubs being the mages, hearts being adventurers, and diamonds being assassins, rogues, kind of stuff. The different colors signify which type of magic they are related to, because you have 4 types of magic: serpent, moon, fire, and chaos magic. Every character in this game can cast spells of some description, but obviously a warrior will be infinitely weaker at spellcasting than a proper mage. And the different spell schools, if you want, have very, very different spells. They have some utility, they have some damage, they have some buffs, they have some debuff, that kind of stuff. But the magic in the different schools is very, very different. And how you build your party entirely depends on course, of course, even on your own desires, but it can have a major outcome in how the game plays out. For all intents and purposes, which is a phrase I use far too often, I've noticed. Anyway, this is a dungeon crawler. If you know of dungeon crawlers, it is very, very similar to whatever you might already know. But 2 things makes this a standout game. First and foremost, you can play this game 2 players. And if you play this game 2 players, you will share things between you, or you should. And that includes the champions, which means that, of course, you have 2 parties suddenly going around trying to recruit certain party members, and you can have a competition between the 2 of you if you find that amusing, or you can have a gentleman's agreement saying, I want that guy, I want that girl, I want him, I want this skelly dude, and that kind of stuff, and then go around and wait for both parties to be formed. The 2 parties are actually playing simultaneously, and you can hurt each other with your own spells, which is something to be very, very mindful of if you should give this game a go and play it with a friend. Another thing, which is something I've always remembered this game for, because I bought it and played it back on release, so that's been a good 30 odd years ago. The magic system. I haven't seen the magic system being repeated. That doesn't mean it hasn't happened. I haven't played every single role-playing game in the world, of course. But when you decide to cast a spell, you have a certain percentage chance for that spell to succeed. If you pump more mana into it than the base cost, then you can increase the chance of the spell succeeding. But you can also overcharge your spells. And of course, that incurs a failure percentage. But if it succeeds, it will permanently lower the cost of that spell. So you can imagine with offensive spells, you can pump all your mana into one cast in hopes of making it cheaper. And by doing that consecutively, you can eventually power up a spell to obscene levels. There's another cap, naturally. But a spell that initially will cost you 2/3 of your mana just to cast can be cast at a tenth of your mana and powered up by spending extra mana into one big wallop of a spell. Let's go over the technical aspects, because there's not an awful lot to cover besides that. Graphics-wise, it's rather basic. Compared to something like Eye of Beholders, it is outright primitive, but it works for what it needs to do. Especially if you can play the game 2 players at the same time, then you have to expect the graphics to be somewhat limited. There's virtually no sound in this game. It's mainly spell effects and doors opening and guns and that kind of stuff. So the sound is okay, it's informative, but it's nothing noticeable. You can control this game playing with mouse or keyboard or joystick. And I would personally say mouse and keyboard, but my friend I played with when I played this 30 odd years ago, I had to play with a joystick and he was perfectly fine with it, so it works out okay. The gameplay is a dungeon crawler. This one has an annoying mechanic that was kept in certain games and gotten rid of in other games, which is hunger. Your characters will be hungry, and if they don't eat or drink, they will eventually start taking damage because they're starving. And when I played this game with my friend 30 odd years ago, we actually got stuck because we ran out of food. I have no idea how far we got into the game, but we got quite far, and then suddenly, okay, no, not doing this anymore. So it is definitely a pain point and a mechanic I'm not personally overly happy about. But also that it plays like your, I wouldn't say average, but like many a dungeon crawler. You have various interactions you can do with your own party. You can commend them if they're doing something that you like, or you can correct them if they're doing something you don't like, and then the AI will sort of adjust accordingly. Because you only give an attack command or defense command, you don't control the individual characters. They have their own will and desires, and if they want to smack a monster in the face, they will do that, and if they don't feel like doing that, they won't. This can be a bit wonky. If you should have a desire to try out this game, I can say from personal experience that it is an excellent game to play, but, and there's a huge but, it requires patience. It requires a lot of effort to get the most out of it, and super importantly, it requires mapping. Good old pen and paper mapping, like we used to do back in our very younger, or much younger days, much younger days, I think it's called. And without it, you would get horrendously lost. So if that kind of extras are not something you intend to put into a game, then Bloodwych would likely not be for you. For me, it's definitely memorable for playing it 2 players at the same time, which is super, super cool. And of course, as I've mentioned, the magic system. As a footnote at the end of this video, I can say that the friend and I, we decided to have a mage duel, because the different spells you can get have wonky things, and of course, powered up, they can be very, very powerful. And he played with the Firecaster, and he had a souped-up fireball that would have done an obscene amount of damage, but because I was using the Green Mage, he had the spell Witchwind, which basically slams monsters against the wall by using the force of wind. But it also throws spells back, so my friend got his own fireball in his face, and then got hit by the effect of the Witchwind, which instantly obliterated his party. That was good fun. Anyway, for what it is, Bloodwych is very, very good, but it definitely requires a lot of patience. On that note, thanks for watching, take care, see you next time, bye bye for now.